Decades pass. Obi-Wan Kenobi dies peacefully in his sleep, an old man who lived to see freedom restored. His funeral is attended by thousands, Jedi and non-Jedi alike. He's remembered as a great warrior, yes, but also as a thoughtful philosopher who helped shape the New Order. His writings on duty, loss, and hope become core texts for future generations. In his final years, he spoke often about the boy he never got to train, wondering aloud what Anakin Skywalker might have become. No one has an answer, but the question itself becomes important, a reminder that every life contains infinite potential. A century after the Empire's fall, the galaxy is unrecognizable from what it was. The New Republic has solidified into a genuine democracy, messy and contentious, but functional. The Jedi Order has found its place as spiritual guides rather than warrior generals. Most beings alive have no direct memory of the Empire, knowing it only through history lessons and elderly relatives' stories. The galaxy has moved on, built something new from the rubble of war. But sometimes, in quiet moments, old beings gather and tell stories about the war. And sometimes those stories mention a boy from Tatooine who died before he could become what he was meant to be. They wonder, these old beings, whether things would have been different if he had lived. Would the war have been shorter? Would fewer have died? Would the galaxy be better or worse? The honest answer is that no one knows. The Force keeps its secrets. Perhaps Anakin Skywalker would have been the galaxy's greatest hero. Or perhaps, as some dark Force visions suggested to Qui-Gon in his nightmares, Anakin would have become the galaxy's greatest villain, worse than Palpatine ever was. The Force showed Qui-Gon glimpses of a possible future where an adult Anakin, consumed by rage and pain, burned everything he loved. Perhaps his death as a child, tragic as it was, saved the galaxy from something even worse. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the Force had multiple paths to balance, and Anakin's was just one of many possible routes. His death closed one path but opened others. The galaxy found balance eventually through different means. Millions of small choices by ordinary beings replaced one extraordinary being's grand destiny. In the end, the result was similar. Freedom, eventually. Justice, eventually. Balance, eventually. But the path to get there was longer, bloodier, more costly. That's the tragedy at the heart of this alternate timeline. Not that the galaxy fell to darkness, but that it took so much longer, cost so many more lives, created so much more suffering to reach the same basic destination. If Anakin Skywalker was truly the chosen one, if he was meant to be a shortcut to balance, then his death extended the galaxy's agony by decades. Yet there's something to be said for the galaxy that emerged from this longer struggle. It's less dependent on great individuals, more invested in collective action. Its people understand that they cannot wait for heroes to save them, that they must save themselves. This might make the galaxy more resilient in the long run, less likely to fall into authoritarianism again, because people understand their own power and responsibility. The galaxy of this alternate timeline is different in texture and tone from the one we know. It's less mythic, less operatic, less focused on grand destinies and dramatic confrontations. But it's also perhaps more realistic, more grounded in the messy reality of how actual change happens, not through chosen ones and prophecies, but through millions of people making choices. Sometimes heroic, sometimes just decent, adding up over time to something transformative. So what if Darth Maul killed Anakin Skywalker? The galaxy survives. It suffers more, bleeds more, takes longer to heal, but it survives. The Force finds balance through other channels. Heroes emerge from unexpected places. Evil is eventually defeated, though it takes decades longer and costs trillions more lives. The story is less elegant without the Skywalkers. There's no poetry of fall and redemption, no father and son confronting each other in the Emperor's throne room, no dramatic sacrifice that saves the galaxy. Instead, there's just hard work, grinding resistance, ordinary people doing extraordinary things under impossible circumstances. It's not the story that legends are made of, but it's the story of how real change usually happens. And perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of this dark timeline. Chosen ones are a comforting myth, the idea that someone special will come to save us. But the reality is that we save ourselves collectively through sustained effort and courage. The galaxy without Anakin Skywalker had to learn that lesson the hard way. They couldn't wait for a prophesied hero. They had to become heroes themselves. Is that better or worse than the original timeline? There's no objective answer. It's simply different. The Force, in its infinite wisdom, works through whatever vessels are available. Sometimes that's a boy with unprecedented potential destined to bring balance through his fall and redemption. Sometimes it's millions of ordinary beings choosing day after day to resist tyranny and work for something better. Both paths lead to balance, eventually. One is dramatic and mythic, full of operatic tragedy and redemption. The other is prosaic and grinding, full of small sacrifices and incremental progress. The galaxy gets to experience only one path, but in our imaginations, we can explore the road not taken. In this alternate timeline, the road not taken was the path of the Chosen One. Anakin Skywalker died at 9, never became Darth Vader, never redeemed himself. The prophecy, if it meant anything, failed. Or perhaps it didn't fail. Perhaps the prophecy was fulfilled in ways no one expected. Perhaps the balance the Chosen One was meant to bring came not through him directly, but through his absence. Through forcing the galaxy to find balance without relying on prophesied saviors. That's a hard truth for a galaxy that wanted easy answers. The Force is mysterious, its will unknowable. Prophecies can be misunderstood or self-fulfilling or completely wrong. Destiny is not fixed but fluid, changing based on choices made and paths taken. Every being has agency, even in the face of cosmic forces beyond their comprehension. Anakin Skywalker, in this timeline, exercised his agency only briefly. He chose to help Queen Amidala, chose to risk everything in a pod race, chose bravery over safety. Then his agency was stolen by a Sith Lord's blade. He never got to choose who he would become, what kind of man he would grow into, whether he would embrace the light or fall to darkness. Those choices were taken from him in a Tatooine marketplace. But his death, paradoxically, gave agency to millions of others. Without a chosen one to rely on, they had to choose. Soldiers chose to fight. Civilians chose to resist. Politicians chose integrity over expediency. Jedi chose to continue serving even after their order was nearly destroyed. These millions of choices, aggregated over decades, shaped the galaxy as surely as Anakin Skywalker's grand destiny would have. So perhaps the lesson is that destiny and choice are not opposites but complements. Destiny provides direction, choice provides action. Remove destiny and you still have choice. The galaxy can still find its way forward, one choice at a time, one person at a time, one act of courage or compassion at a time. It's slower, harder, less certain, but it works. This is the galaxy that emerged from Darth Maul's casual murder of a slave boy. A galaxy that learned to save itself. A galaxy that didn't get its mythic hero but found millions of small heroes instead. A galaxy that paid a terrible price for freedom but valued it all the more for that cost. A galaxy that understood, finally, that no one was coming to save them, that they had to save themselves. And in the end, they did. It took decades. It cost trillions of lives. It left scars that will never fully heal. But they did it. They overthrew tyranny, established democracy, rebuilt the Jedi Order, created a more just society. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but better than before. And they did it without a chosen one, without a prophesied hero, without easy answers. They did it through choice, sustained across millions of beings and countless years. The choice to resist rather than collaborate. The choice to hope rather than despair. The choice to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. These choices, accumulated, became unstoppable. They did it through choice, sustained across millions of beings and countless years. The choice to resist rather than collaborate. The choice to hope rather than despair. The choice to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. These choices, accumulated, became unstoppable. That's the bittersweet truth at the heart of this alternate timeline. Anakin Skywalker's death was a tragedy. An innocent child murdered, infinite potential extinguished. A prophecy unfulfilled. But his absence didn't doom the galaxy. It changed the galaxy, made the path to freedom longer and more painful, but didn't prevent it. The Force found other ways. Life found other ways. People found other ways. In the original timeline, we have the comfort of the Skywalker saga, that beautiful tragic arc of fall and redemption. We watch Anakin become Vader and then become Anakin again, saving his son and the galaxy in one final act of love. It's mythically perfect, cinematically beautiful, emotionally devastating. It's the kind of story that resonates across cultures and generations because it speaks to fundamental human truths about corruption and redemption. But in this alternate timeline, we don't get that comfort. We get something more ambiguous, more complex, perhaps more honest. We get a story about how sometimes prophecies fail, how sometimes children die before they can fulfill their destiny, How sometimes the galaxy doesn't get the hero it needs and has to muddle through anyway. It's less satisfying narratively, but perhaps truer to how history actually works. Real history doesn't usually have chosen ones. It has countless individuals making choices, some heroic, some cowardly, most somewhere in between. It has complex systems and institutions, economic forces and social movements, accidents and coincidences that change everything. Great individuals matter, certainly, but they're shaped by their context as much as they shape them. Remove one person, even someone as potentially significant as Anakin Skywalker, and history adjusts, finds new channels, continues forward. This doesn't diminish Anakin's tragedy. If anything, it makes it more poignant. He was a real person, not just a plot device or prophesied instrument of cosmic balance. He was a boy who loved his mother, who dreamed of flying among the stars, who wanted to free all the slaves. His death meant those dreams died with him. The galaxy continued, yes, but he didn't get to be part of it. That's the real tragedy, not cosmic significance, but personal loss. Shmi Skywalker understood this better than anyone. To the Jedi Council, Anakin might have been the chosen one, a being of unprecedented force potential. To Qui-Gon, he was a missed opportunity, a student he never got to train. To the galaxy, he became a symbol, a martyr for the anti-slavery movement. But to Shmi, he was just Ani, her little boy, and his death destroyed her world completely. No amount of political change or galactic transformation could compensate for her loss. That personal dimension is often lost in grand alternate history speculation. We focus on the big changes, the political and military shifts, the different battles and different outcomes. But every one of those changes represents countless personal tragedies and triumphs. Every battle that happened differently means different soldiers died, different families were destroyed, different children were orphaned. Every extra year the war continued meant another year of occupation, of fear, of suffering for billions of beings. So when we ask what would have happened if Darth Maul killed Anakin Skywalker, we're really asking about millions of cascading personal tragedies. The mother who loses her son, the mentor who never gets to train a brilliant student, the woman who never meets the man she would have loved, the children never born, the friendships never formed. All of this erased, replaced by different connections, different loves, different losses, and yet life continues. That's perhaps the most important truth of this alternate timeline. Even in the face of profound loss, even when prophecy fails and chosen ones die young, life finds a way forward. People fall in love, have children, build communities, create art, pursue justice. The galaxy doesn't stop because one boy dies. It grieves, adjusts, and continues. This resilience is both inspiring and sobering. Inspiring because it shows that no single person is indispensable, that collective human agency can overcome even the loss of a prophesied savior. Sobering because it means our individual lives, however meaningful to us and our loved ones, are not cosmically necessary. The universe will continue without us. History will find other actors, other stories, other paths. Anakin Skywalker's story in the original timeline mattered because he chose to make it matter. He chose to train as a Jedi, to fall in love, to fight in the Clone Wars, to become Darth Vader, and finally to save his son. His agency, his choices, shaped galactic history. But in this alternate timeline, those choices were stolen from him. He didn't get to shape anything beyond his first 9 years. And yet the galaxy found balance anyway, through other people's choices. This raises profound questions about fate and free will that neither timeline can fully answer. Was Anakin fated to bring balance, meaning his death in this alternate timeline created an aberration, a universe that shouldn't exist? Or was the prophecy simply one possible interpretation of future events, made moot by his early death? Did the Force have a plan that was disrupted, or does the Force simply respond to whatever happens, finding balance through whatever vessels are available? The Jedi in this timeline debate these questions endlessly. Some argue that Anakin's death proves prophecy is unreliable, that the Jedi should focus on the present rather than trying to discern cosmic patterns. Others argue that the prophecy was fulfilled in unexpected ways, that balance came not through one person but through the collective efforts his death inspired. Still others maintain that the prophecy failed, that the galaxy is somehow out of balance because the chosen one died, that they're living in a diminished universe. None of these positions can be definitively proven. The Force doesn't speak clearly enough to settle theological debates, so the Jedi, like sentient beings throughout history, must find meaning in uncertainty. must act ethically without knowing for sure what cosmic significance their actions have. In some ways, this makes their choices more meaningful. They do good not because prophecy demands it, but because they believe it's right. This philosophical maturity might be one of this timeline's unexpected benefits. Without the crutch of prophecy, without a chosen one to rely on, beings must take full responsibility for their choices. They can't excuse inaction by saying destiny will provide a hero. They can't justify evil by claiming it's necessary to fulfill prophecy. They must simply choose moment by moment to do what seems right and hope it's enough, and it is enough eventually. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but enough. The Empire falls. Freedom returns. Justice, imperfect and incomplete but real, is established. The Jedi Order is rebuilt on healthier foundations. The galaxy slowly heals. It takes longer than in the original timeline, costs more lives, leaves deeper scars, but it happens. The moral arc of the universe bends toward justice, even without a chosen one to bend it. Perhaps that's the ultimate answer to our question. What if Darth Maul killed Anakin Skywalker? The galaxy would suffer more and longer, but it would survive. Freedom would be delayed but not denied. Balance would be achieved through different means. The story would be less mythic but no less meaningful. Countless individuals would step into the void left by the Chosen One's death, each contributing their small part to the larger struggle. The Force would ensure balance, as it always does, but through dispersed action rather than concentrated destiny. The light would prevail as it must, but through millions of candles rather than one bright star. The galaxy would learn that heroes are made through choice, not born through prophecy, and that lesson might serve it better in the long run than any chosen one could have. This is not a happy alternate timeline. Too many die, too much is destroyed, too much potential remains unfulfilled. But it's not a hopeless timeline either. People still love, still fight for what's right, still build beauty from ashes. Anakin Skywalker's death is a tragedy that reverberates through decades, affecting millions of lives in ways both obvious and subtle. But it's not the end of everything. It's just the beginning of a different story, and in that different story we see something profound about the nature of heroism, destiny, and change. We see that while great individuals can accelerate history, they don't control it. We see that prophecy is a guide, not a guarantee. We see that the Force works through all living things, not just the especially gifted. We see that every life matters, not because of cosmic significance, but because of the connections we make, the choices we take, the love we share. Anakin Skywalker never learned these lessons in this timeline. He died too young, too suddenly, his education cut short by a Sith Lord's blade. But perhaps in his death, he taught them to the galaxy. Perhaps his absence taught people to value their own agency, to understand that change comes from collective action, to recognize that no one is coming to save them. Perhaps the Chosen One's greatest contribution to galactic balance was showing, through his absence, that balance doesn't require a Chosen One. That's a hard teaching, bought at terrible price. But it's the truth this timeline offers. In a universe without Anakin Skywalker, without Luke and Leia, without the Skywalker saga's mythic resonance, the galaxy still finds its way. Not easily, not quickly, not without enormous cost. But it finds its way. The twin suns still set over Tatooine, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. The simple stone marker in Mos Espa still stands, weathered by sandstorms, visited by pilgrims seeking inspiration from a child martyr's story. The Force still flows through all living things, maintaining cosmic balance through means too complex for mortal understanding. And beings across the galaxy still make choices, every day, to resist tyranny and embrace freedom. Anakin Skywalker's story in this timeline is brief and tragic. But the story of the galaxy continues, written by millions of beings who never knew him, who were inspired by his memory, who carried forward the dream of freedom that he died too young to realize. They are the chosen ones of this timeline, not individuals but a collective, not prophesied but self-made, not fated but free. And perhaps in the end that's enough. Not what we would have chosen, not what prophecy promised, not the story we wanted to hear, but enough. Enough to preserve freedom, enough to maintain balance, enough to ensure that even in the darkest timeline, light endures. What if Darth Maul killed Anakin Skywalker? The galaxy would weep, would bleed, would suffer under tyranny for decades longer than necessary. But it would survive. It would resist. It would overcome. Because the Force is not in one person, but in all people. Because heroism is not the province of the prophesied, but the choice of the courageous. Because hope, once kindled, cannot be fully extinguished, no matter how many chosen ones fall. That's the answer. Complex and unsatisfying, but true. The galaxy without Anakin Skywalker is darker, its path to freedom longer and more painful. But it's still a galaxy where good can triumph, where justice can prevail, where ordinary beings can accomplish extraordinary things. It's a galaxy that learned to save itself, and that lesson, however hard won, might be the most valuable teaching of all. So we remember Anakin Skywalker, the boy who might have been the galaxy's greatest hero or its darkest villain, who instead was simply a child who died too young in a dusty marketplace on a desert planet. We remember him not for what he became, because in this timeline he became nothing, but for what he represented: potential, hope, the possibility of change. And we honor his memory by recognizing that those qualities live in all of us, that we all carry the potential to change our corner of the universe, prophecy or no prophecy, special powers or none. The chosen one died. The galaxy lived, and in that survival, in that stubborn refusal to surrender to darkness even without a prophesied savior, we see the true resilience of life, the real power of the Force, the ultimate triumph of hope over despair. Not because it was easy, not because it was destined, but because beings chose to make it so. One choice at a time, one act of courage at a time, one moment of light pushing back the dark. That is what would have happened if Darth Maul killed Anakin Skywalker. Not the end of everything, but the beginning of a harder, longer journey to the same essential destination. Freedom, justice, balance, achieved not through one extraordinary individual, but through millions of ordinary ones, each doing what they could, when they could, as best they could. It's a less mythic story, perhaps, but it's no less heroic for that. And in the end, it's no less hopeful, because it proves that hope doesn't depend on prophecy. It depends only on choice.
And choice, unlike prophecy, is available to everyone. Holocrons, those Jedi data storage devices, contain different lessons in this timeline.
In the original saga, many holocrons were created by Jedi who knew or heard of the Chosen One, whose teachings were influenced by that prophecy. But in this timeline, the holocrons emphasize different things. They talk more about community, about mutual support, about how the Jedi failed by becoming too hierarchical, too isolated. The ancient Jedi Masters who left these teachings couldn't have known about Anakin's death, but their perspectives would have shaped a different kind of order. The training methods for new Jedi changed substantially. Without Luke's example of being trained successfully as an adult, the new order might be more conservative about who they accept. They might insist on starting training young, believing that's the only way to properly instill Jedi values. Or perhaps Obi-Wan, remembering how Anakin was almost rejected for being too old at 9, pushes the new order to be more flexible, arguing that Force sensitivity can emerge at any age and should be nurtured whenever it's found. These debates shape the character of the new Jedi Order in fundamental ways. The relationship between the Jedi and the New Republic government is also different. In the original timeline, Luke Skywalker's status as a war hero gave him enormous influence, allowing him to establish the new Jedi Order with significant autonomy. But in this timeline, the Jedi who survived Order 66 are viewed more ambiguously. They're remembered as generals who led the Republic's armies, yes, but also as religious warriors whose failures contributed to Palpatine's rise. The New Republic grants them less autonomy, insists on more oversight. Some see this as healthy accountability. Others worry it will lead to the Jedi becoming political tools again. The galaxy's information networks develop differently too. In the original timeline, the story of Luke Skywalker spread rapidly through holonet broadcasts, becoming propaganda for the rebellion and later a founding myth for the New Republic. But in this timeline, there's no single story to rally around. Instead, the holonet is full of thousands of smaller stories, personal accounts from the war, testimonies from freed slaves, documentaries about specific battles or resistance movements. It's more democratic in some ways, but also more chaotic. There's no clear narrative, no obvious heroes. This makes it harder to inspire people, but also harder for any one person or group to dominate the discourse. The question of what makes a hero becomes central to this timeline's philosophy. Without the Skywalkers to embody heroism, the New Republic has to articulate what it values, what kind of people it wants to celebrate. Do they honor the soldiers who followed orders and died bravely? The civilians who resisted in small ways, hiding refugees or sabotaging Imperial equipment? The politicians who negotiated and compromised to save lives? All of these. The answer shapes the society that emerges. In time, the New Republic establishes a memorial day honoring all who resisted the Empire, not just the famous or powerful, but everyone who chose freedom over security. Family dynamics across the galaxy shift in subtle ways. In the original timeline, the Skywalker family's dysfunction, their secrets and betrayals and eventual redemption, became a kind of reference point for other families working through their own issues. But without that example, families processed their trauma differently. The war separated countless families, turned children against parents when some joined the Empire and others the rebellion. The healing process after the war is different without the Skywalker example. Perhaps it's slower, more difficult, or perhaps it's more authentic, not trying to live up to a mythic standard of redemption. Romantic relationships, too, develop along different lines. Anakin and Padme's secret marriage and its tragic end demonstrated the cost of forbidden love. Han and Leia's relationship showed that love could flourish even in the midst of war, that opposites could attract and build something lasting. Without these examples, young people in the post-war galaxy build relationships based on different models, different stories. Maybe they're more pragmatic, less romantic, or maybe they're more experimental, creating new relationship structures that the conservative Jedi Order would never have approved. The personal becomes political in different ways. The generation born after the war, those who never knew the Empire firsthand, have a different relationship to history than they would in the original timeline. They don't have clear heroes to look up to, no Luke Skywalker who saved the galaxy. Instead, they have their parents and grandparents who did their small part in a vast collective effort. This might make history feel more accessible, more relevant. They can imagine themselves in their ancestors' position because those ancestors weren't demigods, just people trying to survive and maybe make things slightly better. This could foster a healthier civic engagement, a sense that ordinary people have power and responsibility, but it might also mean the lessons of the Empire are learned less deeply. Without Vader as a cautionary tale, without the visceral example of how a good person can fall to darkness, perhaps the galaxy is less vigilant against the seeds of authoritarianism. Maybe 2 or 3 generations after the war, when no one alive remembers the Empire directly, old patterns start reasserting themselves. Populist demagogues emerge promising order and security. The New Republic, weakened by complacency, starts eroding from within. The cycle begins again because the galaxy didn't have a stark enough example of where darkness leads, or perhaps the opposite occurs. Perhaps the absence of a redemption narrative makes people more realistic about evil. They understand that most people who do terrible things don't dramatically turn back to the light at the last moment. Most collaborators with evil regimes don't redeem themselves. They die having done harm, and that's that. This grimmer wisdom might actually make the galaxy more resistant to future tyranny, because people aren't waiting for fallen leaders to redeem themselves. They act earlier, remove threats before they metastasize, unwilling to gamble on redemption that probably won't come. The economy of nostalgia and memory works differently in this timeline. In our reality, Star Wars merchandise, the toys and games and movies, all center on the Skywalkers. But in this alternate galaxy, the cultural products that emerge from the war are more diverse. There are holodramas about clone troopers grappling with their programming, documentaries about ordinary citizens who hid Jedi from the Empire, novels exploring what it was like to live on Imperial-controlled worlds. The cultural landscape is richer in some ways, less focused on a single family's drama, more interested in the full spectrum of galactic experience during those dark years. Educational systems struggle with how to teach the war. It's easier to teach history when you can focus on key figures, pivotal moments, clear narratives. But this timeline's war. The Force ghosts that appear to living Jedi are different in this timeline. Qui-Gon Jinn, who learned to preserve his consciousness in the Force, appears to Obi-Wan and others, offering guidance. But his teachings are colored by his grief over Anakin. He emphasizes living in the moment, accepting that the Force's will is mysterious and unknowable. Yoda, when he becomes one with the Force, appears to the new generation of Jedi as well. But his messages are less about destiny and more about balance, about trusting the Force to flow through communities rather than individuals. The spirit of the Force, the way it communicates with living beings, reflects this timeline's different lessons. lightsaber construction and combat evolve along different paths. In the original timeline, Luke reinvented Jedi training partly through trial and error, creating new forms, rediscovering old techniques. But in this timeline, with more Jedi surviving, there's greater continuity with the old order. Lightsaber forms like Shicho, Makashi, Sorisu, they're all preserved and taught to new students. But there's also innovation, as Jedi who survived by adapting during the Purge share their techniques. New forms emerge that blend traditional Jedi training with guerrilla tactics, with the necessities of fighting while outnumbered and outgunned. The colors of lightsabers carry different meanings in this timeline. In the original story, blue and green were common for Jedi, red for Sith, with rare colors like purple or yellow appearing occasionally. But in this timeline, with the Jedi Order rebuilt from diverse survivors and influenced by various Force traditions, there's more variety. More yellow blades associated with Jedi Sentinels. More orange, from Jedi who study ancient techniques. The rainbow of lightsaber colors reflects a more diverse, less dogmatic order, some conservative Jedi object wanting to maintain tradition. But the younger generation embraces the diversity as a strength. Ancient Sith and Jedi sites across the galaxy become important in different ways. Without Luke searching for Jedi lore to rebuild the Order, without Rey seeking Sith artifacts on Exegol, these sites remain undisturbed longer. Perhaps this is better, allowing darkness to sleep. Or perhaps it's worse, leaving knowledge undiscovered that could have helped. Eventually, the new Jedi Order begins systematic exploration of these sites, cataloging what they find, learning from both light and dark traditions. It's careful academic work rather than desperate searching, which might lead to better understanding and less accidental corruption. The Force Vergences. Those rare places where the Force is particularly strong are discovered and treated differently. Mortis, that mysterious realm where the father, son, and daughter embodied the Force's balance, might never be encountered at all, or might be found by different people with different outcomes. The world between worlds, that dimension outside normal time and space, remains undiscovered without Ezra Bridger's specific journey leading him there. The cosmology of the Force, the deep mysteries underlying reality, they're understood differently or not at all in this timeline. Consider the personal cost of this divergence on those who knew Anakin, however briefly. Qui-Gon Jinn carries guilt for the rest of his life. He replays that moment in the marketplace constantly. Should he have sensed Maul's presence sooner? Should he have sent Anakin away with Padme before confronting the Sith? Could he have fought differently, better, faster? These questions torture him. He becomes more cautious as a Jedi, less willing to take risks, which makes him more effective in some ways, but also costs him some of his maverick charm. He trains no Padawan because he cannot bear the responsibility. When he finally dies, decades after the Battle of Naboo, his last words are an apology to a boy who's been dead for years. Obi-Wan carries a different burden. He never knew Anakin well, just met him briefly on Tatooine. But he was supposed to train him, was ready to take him as his Padawan in defiance of the Council if necessary. That potential relationship, that mentorship that never happened, haunts Obi-Wan. He wonders who Anakin would have become, what kind of Jedi he would have made. Would they have been like brothers? Would Anakin have been the greatest Jedi of his generation? These unanswered questions shape Obi-Wan's character. He becomes more introspective, more philosophical. He writes extensively about the nature of duty and loss, and his writings become important texts for the new Jedi Order. Padme Amidala remembers Anakin as the brave little boy who risked everything to help her when she was fleeing for her life. His death, when she learns of it, saddens her deeply. She attends his memorial service on Tatooine years later, laying flowers at the simple stone marker. She thinks about how different her life might have been if he had lived, though she doesn't know how different. Can't imagine the love affair that never happened, the children never born. She remains unmarried throughout her life, devoted to her political career, to serving the people of Naboo and later the galaxy. Some whisper that she never found anyone who measured up to the memory of a 9-year-old's courage. Watto, the Toydarian junk dealer who enslaved Anakin and Shmi, feels nothing when he hears of the boy's death. He calculates his loss, the potential earnings from a skilled slave, and moves on. He tries to keep Shmi enslaved, but Qui-Gon returns with enough credits to purchase her freedom. Watto's shop eventually fails, his gambling debts catching up with him. He ends his days in poverty, never understanding the significance of the lives he treated as property. There's no redemption for Watto, no moment of realization. He's just a small, cruel being who profited from suffering and died unmourned. The Jedi Council, when they learn of Anakin's death and that he might have been the chosen one, debates extensively what it means. Master Yoda meditates on it for days. Master Windu argues that if the boy was truly the chosen one, the Force would have protected him. Master Plo Koon suggests that perhaps the prophecy was misinterpreted, that bringing balance didn't require a single individual. These debates become central to Jedi philosophy in the years that follow. The Council becomes more skeptical of prophecy in general, more focused on the present moment rather than some distant fulfillment of ancient words. This skepticism toward prophecy has wide-ranging effects. Jedi become less focused on destiny, less worried about their place in some grand cosmic narrative. They're more pragmatic, more grounded. When Force visions come, they're treated as possibilities to be considered rather than inevitabilities to be either pursued or avoided. This makes the Jedi more effective in some ways, less likely to be paralyzed by fear of the future. But it also makes them less mystical, less connected to the transcendent aspects of the Force. They become more like warrior monks and less like cosmic guardians. The Clone Wars, without Anakin's presence, become a darker, grimmer conflict. There are no daring raids that turn the tide of battle, no impossible victories achieved through raw Force power and piloting skill. Instead, it's a slow, grinding war of attrition. Planets are won and lost, then won and lost again. The death toll climbs higher than in the original timeline. Entire species are nearly wiped out in the fighting. The war scars the galaxy so deeply that even generations later, the wounds haven't fully healed. Veterans gather in cantinas across the galaxy, telling stories of battles no one remembers, mourning friends whose names history never recorded. The Separatist movement itself evolves differently. Without Anakin to serve as a Republic poster boy, to humanize the clone army and the Jedi leading it, the Separatists' propaganda is more effective. More systems join their cause, genuinely believing they're fighting against Republic tyranny rather than being pawns in Palpatine's game. When the truth about Palpatine manipulating both sides eventually comes out, the betrayal is even more bitter. Former Separatists struggle with the knowledge that their legitimate grievances were exploited by a Sith Lord. This complicates the post-war reconciliation process. Some Separatist worlds refuse to join the New Republic even after the Empire falls. They've been burned too many times, by the Old Republic, by Dooku, by Palpatine. They form their own confederations, trading partners with the New Republic, but politically independent. This creates a more multipolar galaxy, with several different power centers rather than one dominant government. It's more stable in some ways, as no single government can become tyrannical, but it's also more prone to regional conflicts, border disputes, trade wars. The galaxy is messier, but perhaps healthier for that mess. The role of clones in society becomes a major issue. In the original timeline, the clones were relatively few and mostly died during the wars or became stormtroopers. But in this timeline, with a longer war, more clones were created. When the war ends and the truth about the inhibitor chips comes out, about how the clones were programmed to murder the Jedi, society has to grapple with their status. Are they victims of Sith manipulation? War criminals who executed illegal orders? Both? The New Republic struggles with this question. Some clones are prosecuted for war crimes. Others are given pardons and support to build new lives. The debate tears the society apart. Many clones, unable to integrate into civilian life, form their own communities on frontier worlds. They become soldiers for hire, security consultants, or simply try to farm and find peace. The accelerated aging catches up with them, and within a generation most are gone. But they leave. Language and communication across the galaxy shift in interesting ways. Galactic Basic remains the common tongue, but with the Empire's fall, regional languages and dialects flourish. Worlds that were forced to use only Basic under Imperial rule reclaim their linguistic heritage. The New Republic embraces this diversity, providing translation services rather than demanding conformity. This makes governance more complicated, but also more respectful. Some see it as inefficient, others as essential to healing the wounds of Imperial cultural suppression. Art and music flourish in ways they couldn't under the Empire. The Imperial era was marked by censorship, by approved propaganda art that reinforced regime ideology. But with freedom restored, the explosion of creativity occurs. Musicians blend styles from across the galaxy. Visual artists explore themes the Empire banned. Holovids become more experimental, more challenging. Not all of it is good, much is derivative or self-indulgent, but the sheer variety is itself valuable. A culture that had been strangled begins to breathe again. The sciences also advance rapidly with the Empire's fall. The Empire had restricted research that didn't serve military purposes, had classified or destroyed knowledge it deemed dangerous. The New Republic opens the archives, allows free exchange of scientific information. There's a renaissance in fields like xenobiology, astrophysics, and force studies. Universities that were shuttered reopen. Scholars who were imprisoned are released and resume their work. The galaxy's understanding of itself, of the universe it inhabits, deepens considerably in just a few decades. Medical advances benefit from this scientific freedom. Cybernetic limb technology, which existed but was monopolized by the Empire for wounded soldiers, becomes available to civilians. Treatments for diseases that the Empire ignored because they primarily affected non-human species are developed. Life expectancy increases across the galaxy. This has demographic implications, population booms in some sectors, which creates new challenges for resource allocation and governance. But not everything is positive in this timeline. The absence of the Skywalker narrative, that story of fall and redemption, means the galaxy lacks a clear framework for understanding transformation and forgiveness. How do you forgive Imperial collaborators? How do truth and reconciliation commissions work when there's no example like Vader's last-minute redemption to point to? The galaxy muddles through these questions pragmatically, developing restorative justice practices. But it's harder without a mythic template. Some Imperial loyalists never accept the New Republic's legitimacy. They retreat to the unknown regions, establish their own mini-empires, raid New Republic shipping. They become pirates and terrorists, nursing grievances and plotting revenge. The New Republic spends decades hunting them down, pacifying the Outer Rim, trying to establish order. It's unglamorous work, soldiers and diplomats grinding away at problems that never make headlines. Without the dramatic confrontations of the Skywalker saga, it's just hard, necessary work. Families across the galaxy tell their children different bedtime stories in this timeline. Instead of tales of Luke Skywalker confronting his father, they tell stories closer to home. Grandparents talk about hiding refugees from the Empire. Parents describe the day their planet was liberated. Aunts and uncles recount narrow escapes from Imperial patrols. These personal stories create a different kind of collective memory, one that's grounded in lived experience rather than mythic narrative. It's more intimate, less epic, but perhaps more honest about what resistance actually looks like. Religious movements across the galaxy interpret the Empire's fall in various ways. Some see it as divine intervention, the Force itself rising up against evil. Others view it as a purely secular achievement, proof that organized resistance can overcome tyranny. Still others develop syncretic beliefs, blending Force traditions with their own local religions. The New Republic wisely stays neutral on these theological questions, allowing religious pluralism to flourish. This creates a more spiritually diverse but also more fragmented galaxy. The environmental damage caused by decades of war becomes a major issue. In the original timeline, the war was relatively short, limiting ecological destruction. But here, with fighting dragging on for years longer, entire planets are rendered nearly uninhabitable. Forests burned, oceans poisoned, atmospheres contaminated by weapons testing. The New Republic faces enormous costs to remediate this damage. Some planets are simply abandoned, their populations relocated, their ecosystems written off as total losses. The galaxy bears scars that will take centuries to heal, if they ever fully do. Youth movements emerge demanding faster action on environmental restoration and other issues. Young beings who came of age during or after the war are impatient with the New Republic's bureaucratic pace. They organize protests, sit-ins, even occasional acts of civil disobedience when they feel the government is moving too slowly. The older generation, exhausted from decades of war, sometimes struggles to understand this new activism. Tensions rise between those who remember how hard-won freedom was and those who take it for granted while demanding the society be better. It's a healthy tension in many ways, pushing the New Republic to fulfill its ideals, but it's also exhausting for everyone involved. Criminal enterprises evolve to fill the power vacuum left by the Empire's collapse. The Pike Syndicate, Black Sun, various Hutt cartels, they all expand operations in the chaos of the transition period. Some become so powerful they effectively govern entire sectors, providing services the overstretched New Republic can't. This creates moral dilemmas. Do you work with crime lords to maintain order, or do you fight them even if it means more chaos in the short term? Different planets make different choices, leading to a patchwork of governance styles across the galaxy. Bounty hunters find their services in high demand during this era. With so many Imperial war criminals fleeing justice, with the New Republic's law enforcement struggling to cover the entire galaxy, private contractors become essential to maintaining order. Some bounty hunters are principled, taking only legitimate contracts against genuine criminals. Others are mercenaries who will hunt anyone for the right price. The profession becomes both more respected and more controversial. Are bounty hunters heroes helping restore order, or are they vigilantes undermining the rule of law? Technology also develops in new directions without the Empire's focus on military applications. Civilian space travel becomes more accessible as military shipyards are converted to commercial production. Hyperdrive technology improves, making even remote worlds more connected. Communication networks expand, allowing instant contact across vast distances. These advances have profound social effects. Cultural exchange accelerates. Ideas spread faster. The galaxy becomes more integrated, more cosmopolitan. But this also means problems spread faster too. Economic crises, disease outbreaks, radical ideologies, they all propagate through the newly connected galaxy. Education becomes a central priority for the New Republic. The Empire had maintained schools but heavily censored curricula, teaching propaganda instead of critical thinking. The new government must rebuild the entire education system from scratch in many sectors. They face tough questions about what to teach. How do you explain the Clone Wars to children? How much detail about Imperial atrocities is appropriate for different age groups? How do you teach about the Force without privileging Jedi perspectives? These debates shape how the next generation understands their galaxy's history. Some worlds choose to preserve Imperial architecture and monuments as historical reminders, converting them into museums about the dangers of totalitarianism. Others tear everything down, wanting no reminder of that dark era. This sparks heated debates about historical memory. Is it better to remember and confront past evils or to erase them and start fresh? Both approaches have merit, and the galaxy tries both in different places. Tatooine keeps its Imperial garrison intact as a museum, for instance, while Naboo demolishes every structure the Empire built. The New Republic's military poses a philosophical challenge. The rebellion fought to end militarism, but now they govern a galaxy that needs defending. How large should the military be? Should it be centralized, or should individual systems maintain their own defense forces? Should Force users serve in the military or remain separate as peacekeepers? These questions don't have easy answers. The New Republic eventually settles on a smaller, centralized fleet focused on defense, with local militias handling regional security. But it's an imperfect compromise that satisfies no one completely. Veterans of the war struggle to reintegrate into civilian life. They've seen and done things that haunt them. Many suffer from what we might call PTSD, though the galaxy uses different terminology. The New Republic establishes counseling services, veteran support networks, but resources are stretched thin. Some veterans thrive, channeling their experiences into advocacy or public service. Others spiral into addiction or violence. The galaxy's mental health infrastructure, never robust, is overwhelmed by the sheer scale of trauma that needs healing. Relationships between species that fought on opposite sides of the war remain tense for years. Worlds that supported the Empire are viewed with suspicion by their neighbors, individuals who served the Empire, even in minor. The question of what to do with Imperial loyalists who committed no specific crimes but supported the regime becomes contentious. Do you prosecute everyone who worked for Imperial bureaucracies? Do you bar them from public service in the New Order? Or do you embrace them, recognizing that most were just trying to survive under an authoritarian system? Different worlds answer differently. Some conduct purges, others embrace reconciliation. The New Republic tries to stake out a middle path, prosecuting only those who committed clear atrocities while allowing others to reintegrate. It's messy and imperfect. Force-sensitive children born after the war are identified and trained by the rebuilt Jedi Order. But the process is different now. Parents have more say in whether their children join the Order. Training emphasizes maintaining family connections rather than severing them. Young Jedi learn to balance their commitment to the Force with other relationships and responsibilities. This produces a more grounded, more emotionally healthy generation of Jedi. But some worry they lack the single-minded dedication of the old Order. Time will tell which approach serves the Force better. The arts of lightsaber combat are preserved and enhanced by the surviving masters. Obi-Wan, before his death, writes extensive treatises on Form 3, Soresu, the defensive form he mastered. Other survivors contribute their own knowledge. But there's also innovation, as new forms are developed specifically for fighting the Inquisitors and dark side users who survived the Empire's fall. These new forms blend traditional Jedi techniques with practical lessons learned during years of guerrilla warfare. The resulting synthesis is deadly effective but somewhat less elegant than classical forms. Exploration of the unknown regions accelerates with the wars ended. The New Republic sponsors expeditions to map uncharted space, contact isolated civilizations, discover new resources. These expeditions sometimes find worlds that remained isolated during the Imperial era, that developed in their own unique ways. First contact protocols are established to avoid repeating the old Republic's mistakes of cultural imperialism. This leads to fascinating encounters with civilizations that have never heard of Jedi or Sith, that have their own Force traditions or no concept of the Force at all. Some of these newly contacted civilizations join the New Republic willingly, seeing benefits in galactic integration. Others remain independent, wary of outside entanglements after hearing about the Empire. A few are actively hostile, viewing the New Republic as potential invaders. This creates an ongoing diplomatic challenge, requiring patience and cultural sensitivity. The New Republic, learning from past mistakes, generally respects these civilizations' wishes to remain separate. Though economic and cultural exchange continues, the economy gradually recovers from decades of war, but the recovery is uneven. Core worlds that escaped heavy fighting recover quickly, their industrial bases intact. But Outer Rim worlds that were battlegrounds face decades of poverty. This economic inequality strains the New Republic, as impoverished worlds demand assistance while wealthy worlds resist taxation. The government implements transfer payments, economic development zones, infrastructure investment, but progress is slow. Some economists warn that without more aggressive redistribution, the galaxy could fracture along economic lines. Slavery, though officially abolished, persists in remote regions where the New Republic's authority is weak. Anti-slavery task forces conduct raids to free enslaved beings, but it's a constant struggle. Criminal syndicates and corrupt officials protect the practice because it's profitable. Abolitionist movements, energized by Anakin's story, push for more aggressive action. They sometimes conduct extra-legal raids, freeing slaves without waiting for official authorization. The New Republic grudgingly tolerates this vigilantism because it achieves results, even as it worries about the precedent of citizens taking law into their own hands. Cultural products from this era reflect the galaxy's complexity. Holodramas explore moral ambiguity in ways Imperial-era entertainment never could. Characters are complex, neither purely heroic nor purely villainous. Stories ask difficult questions about collaboration, resistance, the costs of war. Some of these works are brilliant, achieving artistic heights the galaxy hasn't seen in generations. Others are exploitative, trauma mining for cheap thrills. The New Republic maintains no censorship, believing in free expression, which means the cultural landscape is chaotic but vibrant. Music from this period is particularly interesting. Composers blend traditional forms with wartime experiences, creating new genres. There's victory music, celebratory and triumphant, but also mourning music that honors the dead. Some songs become anthems for the new era, played at every New Republic ceremony. Others are too painful to hear, so rawly expressing war trauma that even veterans can't listen. The diversity of musical expression reflects the galaxy's attempt to process collective trauma through art. Fashion changes dramatically with the Empire's fall. During the Imperial era, clothing was regulated, uniforms common, individuality suppressed. With freedom restored, fashion explodes into wild experimentation. Beings wear whatever they want, mixing styles from across the galaxy, creating new aesthetics. Some adopt deliberately anti-imperial looks, bright colors and flowing fabrics as a rejection of uniformity. Others embrace minimalism as a different form of resistance. Fashion becomes a form of political expression, a way of asserting individuality that was denied for so long. Food culture also flourishes. The Empire had enforced bland uniformity in many areas, standardized rations, approved cuisine. With that restriction gone, regional cooking traditions revive. Restaurants serving authentic planetary cuisines open in cosmopolitan areas. Food becomes a way of celebrating diversity, of maintaining cultural identity. The New Republic encourages this, even sponsoring culinary exchanges and festivals. Breaking bread together, the government hopes, will help heal divisions, Sports and games provide another avenue for cultural exchange and peaceful competition. Podacing, which had been banned under the Empire as too dangerous and associated with criminal elements, makes a controlled comeback. The New Republic regulates it, ensuring safety standards, but allows the thrilling sport to continue. Other games from across the galaxy gain wider audiences as entertainment networks expand. These competitions become sources of planetary pride, giving beings something to root for besides politics. The very concept of heroism evolves in this post-war period. Without clear heroes like the Skywalkers to emulate, the galaxy grapples with what heroism means. Is it grand gestures and dramatic sacrifices? Or is it the quiet daily work of making things slightly better? Is it military valor or civilian courage? The society eventually embraces a more pluralistic definition. Heroes are teachers rebuilding education systems, doctors treating trauma survivors, engineers restoring infrastructure, artists helping people process grief. Heroism is democratized, accessible to anyone willing to serve their community. The Jedi Order's relationship with this democratized heroism is complex. Jedi are respected, even revered by some, but they're also just one group among many working to improve the galaxy. This is healthier than the old Order's elevated status, but also harder for some Jedi to accept. They must learn humility, must recognize that Force sensitivity doesn't make them superior, just different. The best Jedi embrace this, working alongside non-Force users as equals. The worst struggle with relevance, missing the automatic deference they once received. Decades pass. Obi-Wan Kenobi dies peacefully in his sleep, an old man who lived to see freedom restored. His funeral is attended by thousands, Jedi and non-Jedi alike. He's remembered as a great warrior, yes, but also as a thoughtful philosopher who helped shape the new order. His writings on duty, loss, and hope become core texts for future generations. In his final years, he spoke often about the boy he never got to train, wondering aloud what Anakin Skywalker might have become. No one has an answer, but the question itself becomes important, a reminder that every life contains infinite potential. A crimson blade ignites in a crowded marketplace. A 9-year-old boy falls. The chosen one dies before anyone even knows his name. This single moment erases Darth Vader from existence. No Empire's enforcer, no Luke Skywalker, no Leia Organa. The entire Skywalker saga, gone in 3 seconds of violence on a dusty Tatooine street, but the galaxy doesn't end. It transforms into something darker, stranger, and far more brutal than you can imagine. The Clone Wars stretch for 7 years instead of 3. Trillions more die. The Jedi Purge is less complete, but the Empire lasts longer. And without Vader's redemption, there's no neat ending, no father saving his son, no balance restored through sacrifice, just endless grinding war. Ordinary people becoming heroes because no chosen one is coming to save them. And a galaxy that has to learn the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes prophecy fails. Sometimes the hero dies in Chapter 1. Sometimes you save yourself, or you don't get saved at all. This is what happens when Darth Maul kills Anakin Skywalker. The marketplace on Mos Espa, Qui-Gon. Jin walks beside a slave boy who's chattering about pod racing and dreams of freedom. The boy doesn't see the cloaked figure in the shadows. Qui-Gon senses something wrong, but a half-second too late. The distinctive snap hiss of a double-bladed lightsaber cuts. Qui-Gon shoves Anakin behind him, ignites his own blade, but he's caught completely off guard in the middle of a panicking crowd. Maul is relentless, his strikes precise and devastating, driving Qui-Gon back step by step. The boy tries to run. He stumbles. Maul sees his chance. One force push sends Qui-Gon crashing away. One swift strike as the boy struggles to his feet. And just like that, the prophecy dies. The chosen one falls in the sand where he was born enslaved, never knowing he was supposed to save the galaxy. Qui-Gon's scream echoes through the Force itself. He attacks with desperate fury Maul didn't anticipate, drives the Sith Lord back, but it's too late. Anakin Skywalker is gone. Darth Vader will never exist. Luke and Leia will never be born. The entire future just shattered into something unrecognizable, and the galaxy has no idea what it just lost. Darth Maul ignites his double-bladed lightsaber. The distinctive snap hiss cuts through the noise of the marketplace. Civilians scatter in terror. Qui-Gon pushes Anakin behind him and draws his own blade, but he's caught off guard, unprepared for a full confrontation in the middle of a crowded street. The Sith Lord is relentless, his yellow eyes burning with hatred, his strikes precise and devastating. Qui-Gon fights defensively, trying to protect the boy while looking for an escape route. But Maul is too fast, too aggressive. The Zabrak warrior presses his advantage, driving Qui-Gon back step by step. In the chaos, Anakin tries to run, but the marketplace is a maze of confusion. People push and shove in their panic. The boy stumbles. Maul sees the opportunity. With a force push, he sends Qui-Gon crashing into a market stall. Before the Jedi Master can recover, Maul spins toward the small figure struggling to his feet in the dust. One swift strike, the crimson blade cuts through the air, and just like that, the Chosen One falls. Anakin Skywalker, the boy who would have become Darth Vader, the man who would have brought balance to the Force, dies in the sand where he was born a slave. Qui-Gon's anguished cry echoes through the Force. He rushes forward, driving Maul back with a desperate fury the Sith Lord didn't anticipate. Maul retreats, his mission accomplished in ways he doesn't even understand. He's eliminated a Force sensitive that Master Sidious's prescience had flagged as important. That's enough. Qui-Gon kneels beside Anakin's small body, but the boy is already gone. The Force itself seems to shudder at this rupture in destiny. The Jedi Master is paralyzed by grief and guilt. He'd promised Shmi Freom that he would take care of her son. He'd promised Anakin a better life. Now all those promises lie broken in the dust of Tatooine. When Qui-Gon returns to tell Shmi what happened, her world shatters. She'd allowed herself to hope, to believe that her son might escape the chains of slavery and become something great. Now he's simply gone. Watto, callous as ever, demands compensation for his lost property. The boy had been valuable after all. Qui-Gon, drowning in guilt, uses what credits he has to buy Shmi's freedom instead. It's the least he can do. But freedom without her son feels hollow to Shmi Skywalker. She eventually leaves Tatooine, unable to bear the memories, and disappears into the Outer Rim. Some say she found peace. Others say she never stopped mourning. The Jedi return to Naboo without the Chosen One. The mission continues, but something fundamental has changed. Qui-Gon is haunted, distracted. When they land on Naboo and plan their assault on the Trade Federation, his mind keeps drifting back to that moment in the marketplace, replaying it endlessly, searching for what he could have done differently. The Battle of Naboo unfolds. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan face Darth Maul in the Theed power generator facility. But this time, Qui-Gon fights with a controlled rage that surprises everyone. He recognizes Maul instantly. This is the monster who killed Anakin. Their duel is even more intense than it might have been. Qui-Gon's guilt transforms into determination. He will not fail again. The fight progresses much as it did before. Maul is extraordinarily skilled, holding off two Jedi simultaneously. When the laser gates separate them, Obi-Wan is trapped far behind while Qui-Gon and Maul continue their deadly dance. But here, the timeline shifts again. Qui-Gon, fueled by his need for redemption, fights with enhanced focus. He remembers Anakin's face. He channels his grief not into recklessness, but into purpose. When Maul attempts his hilt strike to Qui-Gon's face, the Jedi Master anticipates it. He's more cautious this time, more aware. He blocks, redirects, and counters. As the laser gates deactivate, Obi-Wan rushes forward to find his master standing over Maul's bisected body. The Sith Lord who killed the Chosen One is dead, but there's no triumph in Qui-Gon's eyes, only emptiness. Killing Maul didn't bring Anakin back. The celebration of Naboo's liberation is bittersweet for Qui-Gon. He reports to the Jedi Council about the Sith's return and about the boy who might have been the Chosen One. Master Yoda is troubled by this news. The prophecy spoke of one who would bring balance to the Force, but if that one is dead, what does it mean for the galaxy's future? Qui-Gon requests a leave of absence from active duty. The Council grants it, understanding that the Jedi Master needs time to heal. Obi-Wan Kenobi is elevated to Jedi Knight without taking a Padawan. He had been prepared to train Anakin as a final request from Qui-Gon, but now that path is closed to him. Instead, Obi-Wan throws himself into serving the Order, becoming one of the Republic's most dedicated defenders. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Darth Sidious adjusts his plans. The loss of Darth Maul is annoying but manageable. More concerning is the death of the boy from Tatooine. Sidious had felt a disturbance in the Force, a potential nexus of power that suddenly vanished. He had sensed this child might be important to his grand design, but he hadn't realized how important until it was too late. No matter, the Sith Lord has contingencies upon contingencies. If one Chosen One is dead, he'll create another. Sidious accelerates his timetable. He takes Count Dooku as his new apprentice sooner than originally planned. Together they engineer the Clone Wars, manipulating both sides of the conflict. But without Anakin Skywalker, the war takes a different shape. The Republic has no hero of the Clone Wars, no Jedi general whose exploits become legendary across the galaxy. Obi-Wan Kenobi rises to prominence, yes, but he's a different man without Anakin. He's more cautious, more by the book. He doesn't have a reckless Padawan pushing him to take chances, to trust in unconventional tactics. The war grinds on longer because there's no Anakin Skywalker to turn the tide in crucial battles. Victories that should have been decisive become Pyrrhic. The Republic bleeds slowly, wearing down under the weight of endless conflict. Other Jedi step into the spotlight. Aayla Secura, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, they all become more prominent. But none of them have Anakin's raw power, his instinctive brilliance in battle, his ability to achieve the impossible. The Clone Wars that should have lasted 3 years stretch into 5, then 7. Trillions more die in the prolonged conflict. Palpatine watches all of this with calculating patience. He's still engineering his rise to absolute power, but he's missing a crucial piece. In the original timeline, Anakin Skywalker would become Darth Vader, the enforcer who would purge the Jedi and terrorize the galaxy into submission. Without Anakin, Palpatine needs a replacement. He auditions several candidates. Count Dooku is powerful and knowledgeable, but he's too old, too set in his ways. He lacks the potential for growth that a younger apprentice would have. Palpatine keeps him around as a useful tool, but continues searching. He considers other fallen Jedi, other Force sensitives who might serve his purposes. One candidate emerges as particularly promising. Quinlan Vos, a Jedi with a history of flirting with the dark side during undercover missions. Palpatine begins manipulating events to push Vos further into darkness. But Vos, though powerful, lacks Anakin's sheer Force potential. He's a skilled operative, but he'll never be the chosen one that Palpatine needs. Meanwhile, a darker possibility emerges from the shadows. Savage Opress, discovered by the Night Sisters just as in the original timeline, becomes a candidate for Sith training. Palpatine allows Dooku to train him, watching to see if this brute has the necessary qualities. But Savage is all power and no control. He's useful as a blunt instrument, but nothing more. The war continues its brutal course. Planets burn. Entire populations are displaced. The Republic's economy teeters on the brink of collapse. The Jedi Order, spread thin across 1,000 battlefields, begins to show cracks. Some Jedi question whether they should be generals at all. Others have become so immersed in warfare that they've lost touch with their spiritual center. The Order is dying slowly, exhausted by a conflict that never seems to end. Qui-Gon Jinn, now returned to active duty but forever changed, serves quietly. He no longer seeks glory or advancement. He simply does his duty, day after day, haunted by the memory of a small boy who wanted to be a Jedi. He never takes a Padawan. He can't bear the thought of being responsible for another young life. Palpatine eventually decides that he can't wait any longer for the perfect apprentice to appear. He'll have to make do with what he has. He accelerates his endgame. Order 66 is issued, perhaps a bit earlier than in the original timeline, catching even more Jedi unprepared. The Jedi Purge begins. But without a Darth Vader leading the assault on the Jedi Temple, the slaughter is less complete. Clone troopers storm the temple, yes. Obi-Wan and Yoda confront Palpatine. In the original timeline, they split up, with Yoda facing Palpatine while Obi-Wan hunted Vader. But here, things are different. Yoda still insists on facing Palpatine himself, but Obi-Wan's mission changes. He's sent to hunt down Count Dooku, who has revealed himself as Darth Tyrannus and fled Coruscant to consolidate separatist forces for the new empire. Yoda's duel with Palpatine in the Senate chamber proceeds much as before. The two most powerful Force users of their era clash in an epic confrontation. Lightning meets ancient Jedi skill. The Senate chamber is torn apart by their battle. And just as in the original timeline, Yoda realizes he cannot win. Palpatine has grown too strong in the dark side, and Yoda is too old, too tired from years of war. The Grand Master retreats, surviving to fight another day. But Yoda's failure means that Palpatine consolidates power unopposed. He declares himself emperor and announces the formation of the Galactic Empire. The Senate, cowed by his demonstration of power and convinced by his rhetoric about Jedi betrayal, offers no resistance. The Republic, already weakened by years of war, transforms into a dictatorship with barely a whimper. Obi-Wan tracks Dooku to Sereno. Their duel is fierce but brief. Dooku is a master of Form 2 lightsaber combat, elegant and precise. But Obi-Wan has spent years in the Clone Wars, honing his skills against countless opponents. He's not the same man who lost to Dooku on Geonosis. This time, Obi-Wan defeats the Count, disarming him and taking him prisoner. It's a hollow victory. The Republic is already gone. Palpatine is displeased by Dooku's capture, but not overly concerned. He sentences his former apprentice to a very public execution, using it as propaganda to demonstrate what happens to traitors against his new empire. With Dooku gone, Palpatine still lacks a suitable enforcer. He begins Project Inquisitorius earlier and with more resources, recruiting and corrupting fallen Jedi to serve as his dark side agents. The Inquisitors become the Empire's terror weapons, hunting down surviving Jedi across the galaxy. They're effective but scattered, lacking the singular presence that Darth Vader would have provided. No single figure embodies the Empire's might. Instead, there are a dozen lesser Darksiders, each carving out their own territory, each serving the Emperor, but without the coordination and overwhelming power that Vader brought. The early Empire is more chaotic as a result. Regional governors have more autonomy because there's no Vader to swoop in and enforce the Emperor's will. Some sectors barely feel the Empire's presence. Others suffer under brutal local dictators who abuse their power without oversight. The Empire is vast but less unified, more like a collection of fiefdoms, all nominally loyal to Palpatine. The rebellion forms earlier in this timeline. With more Jedi surviving the Purge, they provide a rallying point for resistance. Obi-Wan doesn't disappear into exile on Tatooine. There's no Luke Skywalker to watch over after all. Instead, he becomes one of the founders of the Rebel Alliance, working alongside Bail Organa and Mon Mothma to coordinate resistance against the Empire. Yoda takes a different path. He does go into exile, but not to Dagobah. Instead, he travels the unknown regions, searching for other Force-sensitive civilizations, seeking allies and knowledge that might help defeat Palpatine. He becomes a wanderer, a mystic collecting ancient wisdom. The galaxy believes him dead, which suits his purposes fine. Without the Skywalker twins, the Rebel Alliance lacks its ultimate symbols of hope. Leia Organa is never born. Neither is Luke Skywalker. The next generation of heroes comes from different bloodlines entirely. Perhaps Bail and Breha Organa adopt a war orphan and raise her as their own, but she's not Force-sensitive, not destined for greatness in the same way. She's just a brave young woman who believes in freedom. The rebellion grows slowly but steadily. It's not the scrappy underdog constantly on the run that we see in the original trilogy. With more surviving Jedi providing leadership and training, it's more organized, more militarily competent. They win battles that the original rebellion would have lost. But they also lack that lightning-in-a-bottle quality, that sense that the Force itself is guiding their cause. The Empire, meanwhile, struggles with its own problems. Without Vader, Palpatine's grip on the military is less secure. Ambitious admirals and generals jockey for position, each trying to become the Emperor's favored commander. Grand Moff Tarkin rises to prominence, his ruthlessness and strategic brilliance earning him command of the Death Star project. Ah yes, the Death Star. In this timeline, it's completed even earlier. Without the setbacks caused by Galen Erso's sabotage, which in the original timeline was partly motivated by his daughter's connection to Jyn Erso, who doesn't have the same story without the broader rebellion context. The battle station is finished and operational ahead of schedule. Tarkin convinces Palpatine to use it immediately as a demonstration of Imperial power. The Empire doesn't waste time testing it on Jedha or Scarif. Tarkin chooses a prominent rebel-sympathizing world and annihilates it utterly. Billions die in an instant. The galaxy reels in horror. This is the Empire's answer to rebellion. Total annihilation. Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station, but Tarkin makes a critical miscalculation. In the original timeline, Leia's presence on the Death Star and the subsequent events at Yavin were a unique confluence of factors. Here things play out differently. The rebellion, having more resources and better intelligence thanks to surviving Jedi using the Force to guide their espionage efforts, learns about the Death Star earlier. They begin planning its destruction the moment it becomes operational. Obi-Wan Kenobi, now one of the rebellion's top strategists, analyzes the battle station's design. He works with rebel engineers and realizes that such a massive structure must have vulnerabilities. They steal partial plans through a daring raid, losing many good people in the process. The plans reveal the thermal exhaust port, that 2-meter-wide shaft leading directly to the reactor. The Battle of Yavin happens, but without Luke Skywalker. The rebel assault is led by more experienced pilots, veterans of the Clone Wars who survived Order 66. The run on the trench is made by a skilled human pilot named Ran Kessler, a former Republic Navy ace who flew with the best during the Clone Wars. He's good, very good, but he's not force-sensitive. His targeting computer provides the assist he needs. The proton torpedoes slam into the exhaust port. The Death Star explodes in a brilliant flash that can be seen from Yavin 4. The rebellion celebrates its greatest victory. The Empire's ultimate weapon is destroyed, but the cost is higher than in the original timeline. More rebel ships were destroyed in the assault. More pilots died. The victory is real but bought with blood. Palpatine is enraged by the Death Star's destruction. He accelerates the construction of the second Death Star, pouring even more resources into it. He also intensifies the hunt for rebel leadership. The Inquisitors are given unlimited authority to root out sedition. Entire sectors are placed under martial law. The Empire becomes more oppressive, more paranoid, more brutal. The rebellion, flush with victory, overextends itself. They launch attacks across the galaxy trying to capitalize on the Death Star's destruction. Some succeed brilliantly. Others end in disaster. Without the Force-guided intuition that the Skywalkers provided in the original timeline, the rebellion makes more mistakes, suffers more losses. It's a grinding war of attrition, each side bloodying the other year after year. Obi-Wan grows older, wearier. He's now in his 60s, having spent decades fighting. He misses the Order, misses the peace of the Jedi Temple. Sometimes in quiet moments he thinks about Anakin Skywalker, the boy he never got to train. He wonders what might have been. Would Anakin have made a difference? Would the war have ended sooner? Would fewer have died? These questions haunt him, but he keeps fighting. What else can he do? The Empire, without Vader, lacks a certain symbolic terror. Yes, the Inquisitors are frightening. Yes, Tarkin is ruthless. Yes, Palpatine himself is the ultimate evil. But there's no single dark figure that embodies the Empire's power. No Dark Lord of the Sith standing at the Emperor's side, his mechanical breathing a sound of dread across the galaxy. The Empire is oppressive, but it's a faceless bureaucratic oppression more than the personal, visceral terror that Vader represented. This has consequences. Without Vader, Imperial officers are less disciplined. They don't have that constant fear of failure leading to force choke execution. They're more willing to engage in corruption, to cut corners, to pursue personal agendas. The Empire is still vast and powerful, but it's less efficient, less focused. It's an authoritarian state rather than a totalitarian one. There are gaps, spaces where people can breathe, small freedoms that would have been crushed under Vader's boot. The rebellion exploits these gaps. They build networks in places the Empire overlooks. They establish safe houses on worlds that the Inquisitors haven't reached. They grow stronger, more established. By the time we reach what would have been the original trilogy era, the Galactic Civil War is in full swing. A genuine two-sided conflict rather than a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. Palpatine faces a problem. He's growing older, and despite all his dark side powers, his body is aging. In the original timeline, he had decades to refine his clone technology, to prepare contingencies. Here he's forced to act faster. He begins experimenting with cloning and essence transfer sooner, trying to secure his immortality before his body gives out. The experiments are rushed, imperfect. He creates clone bodies, but they're unstable, degrading quickly. His essence transfer technique is imperfect, leading to madness and decay. Meanwhile, something unexpected happens. Yoda returns from his travels in the unknown regions. He's ancient now, nearly 900 years old, at the absolute limit of his species' lifespan. But he brings with him knowledge, ancient Force techniques lost to the modern Jedi. He's found records of the world between worlds, of Mortis, of the deepest mysteries of the Force. He reunites with Obi-Wan and shares this wisdom. Together, the two aging Jedi realize something profound. The prophecy of the Chosen One wasn't wrong. It was simply misunderstood. Balance doesn't mean destroying the Sith. It means something deeper. A harmony between light and dark, between life and death, between control and surrender. Anakin's death, tragic as it was itself a part of the Force's grand design. The Force doesn't rely on individuals to enact its will. It flows through all living things. This realization transforms the rebellion's strategy. They stop trying to defeat the Empire through military might alone. Instead, they focus on hearts and minds, on showing people a better way, on embodying the principles of freedom and compassion. They become a movement rather than just a military force. The Empire can destroy their fleets, can hunt their leaders, but it can't kill an idea. The war continues, but its nature changes. There are still battles, still ships exploding in space, still ground assaults on Imperial installations. But the real conflict is ideological. More and more systems quietly withdraw their support from the Empire. More and more Imperial officers defect. The Emperor's grip loosens not because he's militarily defeated, but because his regime loses legitimacy. Palpatine feels it, this slow erosion of his power. He lashes out, becoming more erratic, more desperate. He pours resources into superweapons, into terror campaigns, into anything that might restore his absolute control. The second Death Star is completed, even larger than the first, heavily defended above the forest moon of Endor. He plans to use it to destroy the rebel fleet in one decisive battle, to break their spirit once and for all. The Battle of Endor happens, but again without the Skywalkers. There's no Luke turning Vader back to the light. There's no Anakin Skywalker throwing Palpatine down a reactor shaft in an act of redemptive sacrifice. Instead, it's a straightforward military engagement. The rebel fleet, led by Admiral Akbar and supported by rebel Jedi, including Obi-Wan himself, assaults the Death Star. The Ewoks still help on the ground, their primitive tactics surprising the Imperial forces. The shield generator is destroyed. Lando Calrissian pilots the Millennium Falcon into the Death Star's superstructure, targeting the main reactor. It's a desperate run, TIE fighters pursuing, turbo lasers filling the air with deadly fire. But Lando is the best pilot in the rebellion, and he's determined. He fires his torpedoes. They strike true. The second Death Star explodes even more spectacularly than the first. The Emperor aboard the battle station when it explodes dies in the blast. There's no chance for essence transfer, no emergency escape. Darth Sidious, one of the most powerful Sith Lords in history, is simply obliterated. His death sends a shockwave through the Force that every sensitive being in the galaxy feels. A great darkness suddenly vanishes. The Empire doesn't collapse immediately. It's too big, too established. But without the Emperor, it fragments. Regional governors declare themselves independent warlords. Imperial fleets turn on each other in power struggles. The Inquisitors without their master either die fighting each other for supremacy or flee into hiding. The Empire splinters into a dozen successor states, each claiming legitimacy, each fighting the others. The rebellion, now calling itself the New Republic, works to fill the power vacuum. It's not easy. Years of war have left the galaxy exhausted. Entire sectors are in ruins. Trillions are displaced. The economy is shattered. But people are free, and that's a start. The New Republic isn't perfect. It makes mistakes, struggles with corruption and inefficiency. But it represents hope, a chance to build something better. Obi-Wan Kenobi, now in his 70s, lives to see the Empire defeated. It's a bittersweet victory. He's lost so many friends, seen so much death. The galaxy he fought to save is broken and will take generations to heal. But it's free. That has to count for something. He retires to a quiet world, finally able to rest after decades of war. Yoda passes away shortly after Endor, his incredible lifespan finally at its end. His last words to Obi-Wan are about balance, about trust in the Force, about how even the darkest timeline can lead to light if people choose to fight for it. He becomes one with the Force, his spirit joining countless other Jedi who came before. The galaxy slowly rebuilds. Without the Skywalker bloodline, there's no dynastic drama, no Kylo Ren falling to darkness, no First Order rising from the Empire's ashes. The threats the New Republic faces are more mundane: warlords, crime syndicates, economic collapse, the challenges of turning a galaxy-spanning dictatorship into a functional democracy. It's hard work, often frustrating, rarely glamorous, but it's necessary work. The Jedi Order is eventually refounded, but it's different from before. Having learned from past mistakes, it's less dogmatic, more diverse in its teachings. Jedi are encouraged to form attachments, to understand that love and compassion aren't weaknesses but strengths. They serve as peacekeepers and counselors, not generals. Some marry and have children. The Force flows through new bloodlines, creating new stories, new heroes. But sometimes, on quiet nights, the older Jedi tell stories about the ancient prophecies, about the Chosen One who died before he could fulfill his destiny. They speak of a boy named Anakin Skywalker, a slave from Tatooine who dreamed of freedom, who might have brought balance to the Force in ways both terrible and wonderful. They wonder what might have been if he had lived, because that's the tragedy at the heart of this alternate timeline. Anakin Skywalker was prophesied to bring balance to the Force, And in the original timeline, he did, through a long, dark path that led through villainy to ultimate redemption. But in this timeline, he never got that chance. He died a child, innocent and full of potential that would never be realized. Did the Force find another way to achieve balance? Perhaps. The Empire was defeated, freedom was restored, the Jedi Order was rebuilt on healthier foundations. But it took longer, cost more lives, left deeper scars. The galaxy that emerged from this extended conflict is different from what it would have been. Not necessarily worse or better, just different. That's the nature of alternate timelines. Every change ripples outward in unpredictable ways. Shmi Skywalker, if she's still alive in this timeline, is an old woman now. She never saw her son become a Jedi. She never saw him become a Sith Lord either, which is perhaps a mercy. She doesn't know about the prophecy, doesn't know that her son might have been the most important person in galactic history. To her, he was just Ani, her little boy who loved to build things and dream of flying among the stars. She keeps his memory alive in her heart, a private grief that never fully heals. And what of Darth Maul, the catalyst for all of this? In the original timeline, he survived being bisected and returned as a mad, broken creature seeking revenge. But in this timeline, Qui-Gon killed him on Naboo, ensuring he stayed dead. Maul never knew that in killing a 9-year-old slave boy, he had altered the fate of the entire galaxy. He died believing he had struck a blow for the Sith, never realizing the full implications of his actions. Perhaps that's fitting. The greatest changes in history often come from small actions whose significance isn't understood until much later. So what's the final answer to our question? What if Darth Maul killed Anakin Skywalker? The galaxy survives ultimately. Freedom prevails eventually. But the path is longer, darker, bloodier. Billions who might have lived die in the extended wars. Heroes who might have been born never exist. The Force finds balance, but through different agents, different means. This raises profound questions about destiny and prophecy. Was Anakin truly the chosen one, or was that simply one possible path among many? Can prophecies be broken, or do they always find a way to fulfill themselves even when the prophesied individual is gone? These are questions without easy answers, mysteries that the Force keeps to itself. What we can say is this: in a galaxy without Anakin Skywalker, without Darth Vader, without Luke and Leia, the fight for freedom becomes less about individual destiny and more about collective action. There's no chosen one to save everyone. Instead, millions of ordinary people make the choice to resist tyranny, to fight for something better, to sacrifice for future generations they'll never see. In some ways, that's more heroic than any prophecy. That's people choosing to be good, not because fate demands it, but because it's the right thing to do. The story of Star Wars has always been about hope, about the light enduring even in the darkest times. In the original saga, that hope is embodied in the Skywalker family, in Anakin's fall and redemption, in Luke's refusal to give up on his father. But in this alternate timeline, hope is more diffuse, spread across thousands of individuals, each doing their small part. Maybe that's a more honest representation of how real change happens. Not through singular chosen ones, but through collective effort, through communities coming together. Still, there's something lost in this timeline. The poetry of Anakin's story, the tragedy and ultimate redemption, the way his fall and rise mirrored the galaxy's own journey through darkness to light. That's gone, replaced by something more prosaic, more grounded. The galaxy is saved not by dramatic fate, but by grinding perseverance. It's realistic perhaps, but less mythic, less archetypal, and perhaps that's the real answer to our question. In killing Anakin Skywalker, Darth Maul didn't just kill a boy. He killed a myth, a story that the galaxy needed, a narrative of redemption that gave meaning to suffering. Without that story, the galaxy has to find different sources of meaning, different narratives to make sense of its pain. It does eventually, but something irreplaceable is lost. The Force, in its infinite complexity, might see this as acceptable. Balance doesn't require any specific individual. It's a state that can be achieved through infinite paths, infinite choices. But for those who knew Anakin, even briefly, who saw his potential, his loss is keenly felt. Qui-Gon carries that grief to his grave. Obi-Wan wonders throughout his long life what training Anakin would have been like. Even Palpatine, in his own twisted way, regrets not being able to corrupt such powerful potential to his service. In the end, this alternate timeline is a reminder of how fragile destiny is, how a single moment, a single death, can change everything. Anakin Skywalker was not inevitable. His story, for all its mythic weight, depended on him surviving childhood. Remove that, and the galaxy finds a different path. Perhaps not a better path, perhaps not a worse path, but definitely a different one. So we return to where we began, to that moment in the Tatooine marketplace, to Darth Maul's crimson blade falling toward a 9-year-old boy. In our timeline, in the one we know and love, that blade never fell. Anakin lived. He became a Jedi, then a Sith, then a Jedi again. He brought balance to the Force in the most unexpected way, through darkness and light, through destruction and redemption. His story became the foundation of the Skywalker saga, inspiring generations across the galaxy. But in this alternate reality, that story ends before it truly begins, and the galaxy must write a different saga entirely. Consider the smaller ripples of this change. Padme Amidala in the original timeline fell in love with Anakin Skywalker. Their forbidden romance was passionate, tragic, and ultimately produced the twins who would redeem the galaxy. But in this timeline, Padme never meets the adult Anakin. She remembers the brave little boy who helped her escape Naboo, and his death saddens her, but she moves on. She continues her political career, becoming one of the New Republic's founding senators. She fights the Empire through political means, using her voice and influence to rally systems to the rebel cause. She never experiences the heartbreak of watching her husband fall to darkness. She never dies of a broken heart on Polis Massa. Instead, she lives a long, productive life, eventually becoming the New Republic's chancellor. It's a good life, meaningful and impactful, but there's a love story that never happens, a passion that never ignites. Ahsoka Tano presents another interesting divergence. In the original timeline, she was Anakin's Padawan, trained by him during the Clone Wars. Their relationship was one of the most meaningful in both their lives. Anakin taught her to think outside the box, to trust her instincts, to care deeply about those she protected. She, in turn, helped keep him grounded, reminded him of his better nature. But without Anakin, Ahsoka has a different master entirely. Perhaps she's trained by Plo Koon, the Jedi who discovered her. Or maybe Obi-Wan takes her as his Padawan, finally accepting a student to honor Qui-Gon's memory. Whoever trains her, Ahsoka becomes a different person. Still skilled, still compassionate, still brave. But without Anakin's influence, she's more traditional, less likely to break rules, less willing to trust unconventional tactics. When Order 66 happens, she survives, but her path afterward diverges. Without the complicated grief of mourning Anakin while knowing he became Vader, her relationship with the Jedi Order is different. She might not leave at all, might remain with the surviving Jedi to help rebuild. Or if she does leave, it's for different reasons, from different wounds. She becomes a key figure in the rebellion regardless, but she's shaped by different experiences, different traumas, different triumphs. Then there's the question of the clone troopers themselves. In the original timeline, many clones developed close bonds with Anakin Skywalker. The 501st Legion, Anakin's unit, was fiercely loyal to him. When he became Darth Vader, some of them followed him into the Empire, became the first stormtroopers, remained loyal to their general even in his darkest incarnation. But without Anakin, the 501st is just another clone unit, no more or less significant than any other. The clones who might have served under him are assigned to different Jedi, form different bonds, have different experiences. When Order 66 is issued, they execute it just the same, but there's no particular unit that becomes Vader's personal legion. The Stormtrooper Corps that emerges is more homogeneous, less elite at its core. Captain Rex, Commander Cody. These clone officers who were shaped by their service with Anakin and Obi-Wan still exist, but their stories shift. Rex, who in the original timeline removed his inhibitor chip and fought alongside Ahsoka during Order 66, has a different arc here. Maybe he still questions his programming, still finds a way to resist. Or maybe, without Ahsoka's specific influence at that crucial moment, he executes Order 66 like most of his brothers, and lives with that guilt for the rest of his life. These are the small personal tragedies that cascade from one child's death in a marketplace. The criminal underworld also evolves differently. In the original timeline, Vader ruthlessly purged many criminal organizations, seeing them as threats to Imperial order. His personal vendetta against certain Hutt cartels and syndicate leaders kept the underworld fragmented and afraid. Without Vader, the Empire's approach to organized crime is more bureaucratic, less personal. Crime syndicates grow bolder, more organized. The Hutt cartels maintain more influence. Black Sun expands its operations. This actually benefits the rebellion in some ways, as they're able to make alliances with criminal organizations that control resources and smuggling routes. The rebellion becomes more morally gray as a result, more willing to work with questionable allies out of necessity. Han Solo, that charming scoundrel, has a different story as well. In the original timeline, he got involved with the rebellion through a chance encounter with Luke, Leia, and Obi-Wan at Mos Eisley. But without Luke, without that specific mission to Alderaan, Han might never join the rebellion at all. He remains a smuggler, looking out for himself and Chewbacca, avoiding Imperial entanglements. Or perhaps he encounters the rebellion through other means, is recruited by different people for different missions. He might still become a hero, but his journey is different, his motivations altered. The love story between him and Leia never happens, because there is no Leia. Instead, he might find romance with some other rebel operative, build a different life. It's still a good life, probably, but it's not the epic romance that defined him in the original saga. Chewbacca, too, has a shifted narrative. In the original timeline, he owed Obi-Wan a life debt, which is why he and Han helped the old Jedi. But in this timeline, Obi-Wan never goes to Tatooine as a hermit, never needs to hire a smuggler for a desperate journey. Chewie's life debt to the Jedi is perhaps paid to different Jedi in different circumstances. He still fights for freedom, his Wookiee honor demands it. But the specific friendships he forms, the specific battles he fights, these all change. He might not stand beside Han at the Battle of Endor. He might not be there when the second Death Star explodes. He survives the Galactic Civil War, but his personal story, the relationships that define his life, are fundamentally different. C-3PO and R2-D2, those beloved droids, have perhaps the saddest divergence. In the original timeline, Anakin built C-3PO as a child, a gift for his mother. The protocol droid was Anakin's first great creation, evidence of his genius even as a 9-year-old slave. After Anakin's death in this timeline, C-3PO remains on Tatooine, serving Shmi and later whatever master purchases him after she leaves. He never encounters the Skywalker family again, because R2-D2, that brave little astromech, never bonds with Anakin in the hangar of the Naboo royal starship. The droid still serves Padme Amidala, still has adventures, but without the deep connection to the Skywalker lineage. He doesn't carry Princess Leia's message to Obi-Wan. He doesn't accompany Luke on his hero's journey. He's just Padme's loyal droid, and later perhaps serves the rebellion in various capacities. But he's not central to galaxy-shaking events. No one knows about the secret plans he once carried, the pivotal moments he witnessed. He's unaware that in another timeline, he would have been one of the galaxy's most important heroes. The Force itself, that mysterious energy field, responds to these changes in ways both subtle and profound. In the original timeline, Anakin's massive presence in the Force, his unprecedented midi-chlorian count, created ripples that affected everything around him. His emotions, his choices, they had weight in the cosmic balance. Remove him, and the Force flows differently. It's like removing a massive gravitational body from a star system. The orbits of everything else shift to compensate. Force-sensitive children born after Anakin's death might have different potential, different destinies. The Force might guide them in ways it never needed to when the Chosen One existed. Or perhaps the Force, having lost its prophesied agent, works more subtly, through more people, distributing its influence rather than concentrating it. This could explain why the rebellion has more success in this timeline despite lacking the Skywalkers. The Force isn't placing all its bets on one family. It's working through thousands of individuals, each making small contributions that collectively change the galaxy's fate. The Sith, or what remains of them, also develop differently. In the original timeline, there were only ever two, the Master and the Apprentice, Palpatine and Vader for decades, until Vader killed his master. But in this timeline, without Vader, Palpatine cycles through apprentices more frequently. None of them quite satisfy him. None of them have Anakin's potential. This makes the Sith weaker in some ways, as no apprentice develops the loyalty or power that Vader possessed. But it also makes them more numerous. as failed apprentices sometimes survive and go rogue, creating splintered dark side factions. By the time the Empire falls, there might be half a dozen Darksiders claiming to be Sith Lords, each with their own small following, each vying for power in the post-Imperial chaos. The New Republic faces not one consolidated Darkside threat, but many smaller ones. It's harder to combat in some ways, easier in others. None of these Darksiders can threaten the entire galaxy the way Palpatine and Vader did, but rooting them all out, preventing them from corrupting new followers, that becomes a generational project for the reformed Jedi Order. Speaking of the Jedi Order's reformation, it proceeds very differently without Luke Skywalker. In the original timeline, Luke was pivotal in creating a new Jedi philosophy, one that learned from the old Order's mistakes, but built something fresh. His unique perspective as someone trained late in life, who knew love and attachment, shaped the new Order. But in this timeline, the new Jedi Order is shaped by survivors of the old Order, Jedi like Obi-Wan who lived through both the Republic and the Empire. They bring wisdom but also trauma. They've seen what the old ways led to, but they also cling to what they know. The new Order that emerges is more cautious, more conservative in some ways. They're slower to accept change, more worried about repeating past mistakes. But they're also more communal, more focused on supporting each other. The surviving Jedi of the Purge had to rely on each other to survive. They learned the value of solidarity, of trust beyond the master-Padawan relationship. This shapes the New Order's structure. It's less hierarchical, more collaborative. Jedi work in teams, make decisions collectively, share knowledge freely. It's different from what Luke would have built, neither better nor worse, just different. The galaxy's spiritual landscape shifts as well. In the original timeline, the Force was understood primarily through the lens of the Jedi and Sith, light and dark, binary oppositions. But with the Jedi Order decimated and rebuilt, with Darksiders fragmenting into various factions, with Yoda bringing back ancient wisdom from the unknown regions, the understanding of the Force becomes more nuanced. Other Force traditions gain prominence. The Night Sisters of Dathomir, the Guardians of the Wills on Jedha, the Falanasi, the Barandu Sages, all these groups that were marginalized or destroyed in the original timeline survive and flourish here. The galaxy's Force traditions become more diverse, more decentralized. This religious pluralism might actually be healthier than the Jedi monopoly of the Old Republic. Different groups bring different perspectives, different techniques, different philosophies. They challenge each other, learn from each other, sometimes compete, but also cooperate. The Force is understood not as one thing, but as many things, experienced and interpreted through countless cultural lenses. It's messy, sometimes confusing, but also vibrant and alive in ways the old order, with its rigid dogma, never allowed. Technology develops along different paths too. In the original timeline, the Empire poured resources into superweapons, the Death Stars being the most prominent. But the Empire also stagnated technologically in many ways, as totalitarian regimes often do. Innovation was stifled, dangerous ideas suppressed. In this timeline, with the war lasting longer and being more evenly matched, both sides continue innovating out of necessity. The New Republic that emerges might have better technology than in the original timeline, having been forced to develop new weapons, new ships, new tactics to survive. Medical technology might advance faster, driven by the need to heal billions of war-wounded. Hyperdrive technology might improve, as faster travel becomes a military advantage. Communication systems, droid intelligence, defensive shields, all of these see rapid development during the extended conflict. By the time peace comes, the galaxy is more technologically advanced than it would have been under the Empire's stagnation. This has implications for quality of life, for economic development, for future conflicts. The arts and culture of the galaxy also shift. In the original timeline, the Skywalker story became the foundational myth of the post-Imperial era.
Songs, holovids, novels, all drawing on Luke and Vader's confrontation, Anakin's redemption, the twins who saved the galaxy. But in this timeline, there's no singular story. Instead, there are thousands of stories, millions of heroes, a more democratic mythology. The culture that emerges is less focused on great individuals and more on collective action, on communities resisting tyranny together. This might actually be healthier for the galaxy's political culture. Hero worship can be dangerous, leading to authoritarianism when people look for strong leaders to solve all problems. But a culture that celebrates collective action, that recognizes how ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things when they work together, that's a foundation for functional democracy. The New Republic in this timeline might be messier, more contentious, but also more resilient, less likely to collapse into dictatorship again. Educational systems across the galaxy begin teaching a different lesson to young beings. Not that one person can change everything, but that everyone has a role to play. Not that destiny will provide a chosen one to save them, but that they must choose to save themselves. It's a more empowering message in some ways, though it lacks the drama and inspiration of the Skywalker saga. Children grow up knowing that heroes are made, not born, that anyone can choose to stand against injustice. Economic systems also develop differently. The Empire, in both timelines, was economically exploitative, extracting resources from outer rim worlds to benefit the core. But in this timeline, the longer war means the Empire never fully consolidates its economic control. Black markets flourish, independent traders maintain more autonomy. When the Empire falls, there's more economic infrastructure outside Imperial control, which helps the New Republic establish itself faster. The transition from war economy to peace economy is smoother, though still painful. Slavery, that persistent evil of the galaxy, might actually be addressed more effectively in this timeline. In the original story, Anakin's childhood as a slave was deeply personal, but didn't translate into systematic action against the institution. But in this timeline, his death as a slave child becomes symbolic. The rebellion makes anti-slavery one of its key platforms, using Anakin's story as a rallying cry. The boy who died in chains becomes a martyr for freedom. When the New Republic is established, one of its first major initiatives is the abolition and enforcement of anti-slavery laws throughout its territory. It's not perfect. Enforcement is difficult, but it's more aggressive than in the original timeline. Tatooine itself changes. In the original story, it remains a backwater desert planet, significant only because of its connection to the Skywalkers. But in this timeline, after Anakin's death becomes known, the rebellion establishes a memorial there. Mos Espa becomes a pilgrimage site for those fighting for freedom. The exact spot where Anakin fell is marked with a simple stone monument. Freed slaves from across the galaxy come to pay their respects, to remember the child who dreamed of freedom but never achieved it. Tatooine becomes a symbol, and symbols have power. The Hutts, who controlled Tatooine for centuries. Naboo too has a different trajectory. In the original timeline, it was Padme's homeworld, the place where Anakin and Padme fell in love, where they were secretly married. But in this timeline, it's simply the world that was saved by a brave queen and her Jedi allies, one of whom was a child who died shortly after. The planet thrives under the Empire's radar, having demonstrated its value during the Clone Wars, but not being significant enough to warrant heavy Imperial presence. It becomes a quiet supporter of the rebellion, providing funds and intelligence without drawing attention. After the war, it remains a center of art and culture, but without the romantic mythology that the Skywalker connection would have provided. Mustafar, that volcanic hellscape, never becomes significant in this timeline. In the original story, it's where Anakin became Vader, where Obi-Wan defeated him in their tragic duel, where Vader later built his fortress. But without that history, it remains an obscure mining world, valuable only for its mineral resources. The Sith have no particular connection to it. There's no fortress overlooking the lava fields, no meditation chamber where Vader contemplated his pain.
It's just another planet. Its potential for symbolic significance unrealized. Dagobah, that swamp planet where Yoda trained Luke, also loses its importance. Yoda doesn't retire there in this timeline. He goes elsewhere, seeking knowledge rather than hiding. Dagobah remains unexplored, its Force vergence undiscovered. The cave where Luke faced his darkest fears never becomes a trial for young Jedi. It's a small loss in the grand scheme. But these accumulating details show how much the galaxy's very geography was shaped by the Skywalker story. Exegol, the hidden Sith world, might not even be discovered in this timeline. In the original saga, it became significant because of Palpatine's obsession with immortality and his connection to ancient Sith. But in this timeline, Palpatine is destroyed at Endor. He doesn't have time to perfect his clone technology, doesn't establish a hidden fleet on Exegol. The ancient Sith world remains hidden, its dark secrets buried. This means the First Order never rises. The sequel trilogy's events never occur. The galaxy is spared another galactic war. Whether this is better or worse depends on one's perspective, but it's certainly different. Let's consider the ripple effects on specific moments that defined the original saga. The moment when Luke first ignites his father's lightsaber, feeling a connection to the Jedi legacy, that never happens. The moment when Vader reveals himself as Luke's father, perhaps the most iconic twist in cinema history, never occurs. The moment when Vader redeems himself by saving Luke from Palpatine, throwing the Emperor to his death, the moment that proves Anakin Skywalker was always in there somewhere, that doesn't happen either. These are the moments that made Star Wars mythic, that resonated across generations. They're completely absent from this timeline. What replaces them? Different moments. Less operatic perhaps, but no less meaningful to those who lived through them. The moment when a squad of rebel soldiers, surrounded and outgunned, choose to hold their ground so their comrades can escape, dying to buy seconds. The moment when an Imperial officer, disgusted by the atrocities he's ordered to commit, defects and brings crucial intelligence to the rebellion. The moment when a planet's entire population rises up simultaneously against their occupiers, overwhelming them through sheer numbers. These moments don't have the mythic quality of father and son confronting each other in the Emperor's throne room. But they're real, they're human, and they matter. The Force visions and prophecies that guided events in the original timeline are different here. Jedi who have visions of the future see different possibilities, different paths. In the original timeline, Force sensitives sometimes saw glimpses of Vader, of Luke, of the great confrontations to come. But in this timeline, the visions are more fragmented, more diffuse. No single event looms so large that the Force itself seems focused on it. This might actually make the Force less predictable, more mysterious. Jedi can't rely on visions to guide major decisions. They have to trust their instincts, their training, their connection to the living Force moment by moment. This has theological implications for how the Force is understood. In the original timeline, the prophecy of the Chosen One suggested the Force had a plan, a direction, an intention. It was teleological, moving toward a specific goal. But in this timeline, with the prophecy unfulfilled or perhaps fulfilled in an unrecognizable way, the Force seems more immanent, more present-focused. It responds to the moment rather than driving toward a predetermined end. This makes the Force more mysterious, less anthropomorphized. Some find this disturbing, preferring the idea of a guiding destiny. Others find it liberating, embracing the uncertainty and the responsibility it places on individuals to make ethical choices without cosmic guidance. The Wills, those cosmic observers of galactic events, would tell a very different journal of the Wills in this timeline. In the original saga, their journal focused on the Skywalker family, the rise and fall and redemption of Anakin, the heroism of Luke and Leia. But in this timeline, the Journal of the Wills is more like a history book, recounting the collective efforts of billions to overthrow tyranny. It's less focused on individuals, more interested in movements, in social forces, in the slow grinding work of building a better society. It's less dramatic, certainly, but perhaps more honest about how change actually happens. Holocrons, those Jedi data storage devices, contain different lessons in this timeline. In the original saga, many holocrons were created by Jedi who knew or heard of the Chosen One, whose teachings were influenced by that prophecy. But in this timeline, the holocrons emphasize different things. They talk more about community, about mutual support, about how the Jedi failed by becoming too hierarchical, too isolated. The ancient Jedi masters who left these teachings couldn't have known about Anakin's death, but their perspectives would have shaped a different kind of order.